generally in urban areas 4 to 6 Celsius, and there'll be variable amounts of cloud first thing as well. There'll also be increasing amounts of showery rain moving through Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, northern and central England, as well as the northeast of Scotland. The showery rain will become more widespread by the afternoon, so for much of England and Wales it's a case of bright spells interspersed by showers. Drier towards the northwest, western Scotland mostly dry with some decent sunny spells, 12 or 13 Celsius here, 14 or 15 in the southwest, just 10 again on the North Sea coast. Friday starts off cold with a frost in many places. A sunny start, but quite quickly the cloud will build and we'll see further showers here and there, particularly towards the east. The weekend brings more unsettled weather from the south, longer spells of rain affecting many parts of England and Wales, drier for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the latest on the A1M in North Yorkshire. The outside lane remains coned off both ways. Junction 48 to 47 between Boroughbridge and Allerton Park for ongoing investigation work following a collision. Long queues on the approach and on surrounding routes, not least for the A61 and the A19. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, one lane still closed clockwise at 17 at Prestwich following a breakdown. And the M4 remains shut, heading west towards Bristol, 18 to 19 between Bath and the M32. Where lorries caught fire, smoke is blowing across the motorway. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, the two inside lanes are closed clockwise at 25 for the A10 following an accident. People reported on the motorway as well. And on the Kent stretch, the two outside lanes are closed clockwise just after the Darren interchange, where a car's overturned, queues back over the QSU bridge. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good evening. It's happened again. Nick Robinson, from his lofty, comfortable perch at the BBC, is attacking GB News again. We debate tonight, is GB News biased? Is GB News impartial? Does GB News fit with the law of providing due impartiality? I have a feeling, actually, the traditional broadcasting industry are beginning to get rather scared of this channel. We'll talk defence spending. The Prime Minister says we're going onto a war footing. We will increase spending by 2030. But why not just do it now if we're really on a war footing? And Liam Halligan will come in to pay personal tribute to Frank Field, somebody who'd been in British politics for over 40 years, and one of those very rare figures that commanded respect from both sides of the House. We heard this morning the announcement of his death at the age of 81. But before all of that, let's get the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Nigel. Good evening. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories this hour. A teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after 2 teachers and a student were stabbed at a secondary school in Wales. Well, our GB News reporter Jack Carson is there for us now. Jack, what can you tell us?
Well, it was 11:20 a.m. this morning that police say they were called to an incident here at the Amman Valley School in South Wales. And as we've heard this afternoon in the confirmation that 3 people were stabbed in an incident here, 2 teachers and 1 teenage girl. And the police also confirming that a teenage girl has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and remains in custody. The investigations here still very active. The school will be closed tomorrow, but police also confirming that a knife has been recovered from the school here and taken into evidence. Superintendent Ross Evans spoke earlier on.
I'm aware that there is footage circulating on social media, and I would ask that this is kindly removed to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to avoid further distress to those involved. This was a very distressing incident, and our thoughts are with the victims.
Well, of course, that appeal going out not only from the police but also from Carmarthenshire County Council as well, for those people that have circulated those images on social media to remove them. But the Welsh Ambulance Service as well, at the time of the incident, did confirm that they sent 4 emergency ambulances to the scene here, including air ambulances as well, and that critical care was delivered here on site to those people injured. But we did get the confirmation earlier that certainly the pupils and teachers here at the school, that those injuries so far were non-life-threatening. The school will be closed tomorrow, but support will be provided to those who need it.
Jack Carson there for us in Wales. Thanks very much, Jack. I know you'll be following that into breakfast as well. On to other news, and 3 men have been arrested following the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, while trying to cross the Channel yesterday. The National Crime Agency says they were arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. Those detained include 2 Sudanese men, aged 22 and 19, and a 22-year-old South Sudan national. Comes as figures from the Home Office show more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. Well, as we've been hearing, the Prime Minister insists that his defence spending pledge is fully funded, though he declined to rule out cuts in other areas. The government has committed to reaching 2.5% of GDP by the year 2030 and is encouraging other members of NATO to match that amount. Speaking in Berlin next to his German counterpart, Mr Sunak said rising conflicts around the world are making defence spending more urgent.
We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies and the 2 largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Right, straight back to Nigel.
Good evening. Now, look, I've no wish to be self-indulgent, but GB News has been making a bit of an impact. And I think over the course of the last 6 months, the channel has grown. Certainly, the viewing figures and the listening figures back that up. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the fact that some evenings this show gets more viewers, according to the official figures, than the other news channels added up together. In line with that, I think GB News' influence over national debate is growing way beyond its size. Now, look, of course, we've got problems with the advertising industry. The boycott that was put on this channel before a single minute of transmission has made it hard. But there is an all-out attack coming on GB News from existing established broadcasters. This was Andrew Neil, and bear in mind that Andrew Neil was the chairman for a brief period of this company when it launched. Here was Andrew Neil yesterday speaking to a House of Lords committee.
I'm surprised how tolerant Ofcom has been of GB News. I think it may be because Ofcom knows that the rest of the broadcast universe is on the centre-left, bit more left band, and so it gave GB News a bit more leeway to try and settle down. I am surprised that any regulator would allow politicians sitting in the House of Parliament to present TV programmes, political TV programmes. I mean, if I had stayed as chairman, it would never have happened because I would not have had any politician present a television show in the first place. And I would certainly never have allowed politicians to interview other politicians from the same party. I mean, I just find that incredible. And I think on these areas, Ofcom needs to find a backbone.
Well, Andrew Neil didn't last very long at this channel. He did 8 episodes of his programme before he left. And I think what he's saying sounds a little bitter. But my real complaint is Nick Robinson. Yes, he of the Today programme from his lofty and very comfortable perch at the BBC repeatedly, continually has a go at GB News. And today's tweet kind of just summed up where we are with Nick. So, Nigel Farage, one of the founders and owners of the Reform Party, can present an impartial programme on a TV news channel during the general election, according to the broadcasting regulator, Ofcom. The leader of the party, Richard Tice, his only MP, Lee Anderson, can also present programmes in the run-up to the campaign alongside Jacob Rees-Mogg. Is this your idea of impartiality? Well, I wonder, Nick Robinson, how impartial are you? I mean, you were a member, weren't you, of the Conservative Party in years gone by? I mean, you very recently said in an interview with Lord Cameron on the Today programme, you said, but when Israel attacks and murders tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians, and I could go back over the years, and I could accuse you time and again of allowing your opinion to be expressed on the BBC. I don't think you're impartial either. I don't think any human being that works in news or current affairs is impartial. We all have our own personal opinion, but that's not the point. But have a look at what Adam Bolton said a few months ago, he of Sky News for over 3 decades.
I think there is a delicate and important broadcast ecology in this country. I think, you know, GB News is trying to bust that ecology, and frankly, what Ofcom should do is shut it down, like it shut down RT.
Forgive me for laughing. It's our pitch. It's our little game. We're the established broadcasters. Nobody else can be allowed to join our club. Adam Bolton, I'd remind you, in the early days when Sky launched, Sky actually had some very opinionated presenters. Sky was the challenger, but now you're the establishment. You don't want anybody else to be able to play with the ball. But here is why Andrew Neil is wrong. Here is why Nick Robinson is wrong. Our duty as broadcasters is not to be impartial. And this channel has never pretended that it would have impartial presenters. Our job as broadcasters is to give due impartiality. That is the definition, that is the law that is laid down. And due impartiality means that whilst we have our opinions and we can quite freely state them, we have to make sure that the other side of the argument gets a fair airing. All right? That is what is demanded of us. Now, the pressures that are being put on Ofcom are absolutely enormous. And yes, they have picked the channel up once or twice for things that have gone wrong, which, if you think about it, for a fledgling broadcaster, is not of itself particularly surprising. I would say this, and I really mean this, I think this channel gives more airtime to different views right across the political spectrum in this country than any of the other broadcasters. I don't believe we break the law. I think we give due impartiality. I don't believe that GB News is biased at all. I think this all-out attack on us that is coming from the established broadcasters is rather like the way UKIP was treated 10 years ago as it was rising in the polls. Human beings who've got their own little club never want anyone new to join. Love to get your views. Farage@gbnews.com. Well, somebody who knows a thing or two about broadcasting is Nick Pisani, former series editor of BBC's Question Time, former head of presentation for David Cameron. Nick, you've worked, for many, many years in radio, in television, and we were chatting before coming on air about the great David Dimbleby. And he was impartial in a way that we never knew what his view was.
And in fact, I have no idea what his political view was. As you say, 40 years he presided over general election debates, the Euro referendums, in and out. No one has a clue how David votes, if indeed he votes. And that did give him, though, a certain quality and enabled him, without there being any complaints from the political parties, to do all of the election programmes and so forth without any kind of controversy at all.
Which he did for half a century and did it rather well.
He did it very well.
But there are plenty of other people in British broadcasting who have opinions and give their opinions or show their own personal preferences in debates.
Well,
and there's nothing wrong with that, is there?
I think you can go back to the early days or the mid-90s with Sky. I remember there was a weekly programme or a nightly programme called Target, and it was presented, as far as I remember, by Lord Tebbit, Norman Tebbit and Austin Mitchell. And they were either an MP or in the House of Lords. And that was very controversial at the time because it was active politicians presenting a programme, of course balanced one for the other. I wouldn't call GB News impartial. I think we all know where it's coming from. And its presenters certainly are, I think, that across the board are not seen as representing anything other than a centre-right view. But I'm not sure the public as a whole would want to see GB News closed down. Clearly, I think people like you, if you were to stand in an election...
That would change things.
Yeah, it would absolutely, fundamentally change things. I don't think there's any way you could take part during an election if you were a participant. But right now, you're a rather influential opinion former and TV presenter. You're not really actively a politician, much as you may like to have been had you won many of the elections you stood for and lost in.
Well, I won 2 national elections, actually, for the European Parliament. You might have forgotten that. If you went to the BBC, you would.
I think most of us remember why David Cameron was forced to call the election. Sorry, call the referendum.
But I mean, GB News, they are the new kids on the block. They have come in to challenge the broadcasting establishment. I suppose it's natural in some ways that we get these attacks from Adam Bolton and Nick Robinson.
Well, the rules were drawn up in a slightly different era. The question is, really, do people want access to a range of different channels that have points of view? Now, I'm not suggesting that we go down the Fox route in America, but obviously
CNN.
MSNBC, for instance, is seen as a kind of Democrat-leaning or sympathetic channel. And I think that there's a lot of output out there, much of it people would say from the BBC that is also of the centre-left. The question is, overall, does it matter? And would we, as viewers, be worse off or better off if channels like yours weren't allowed to exist? I think, equally, you could have another channel that stood on the other side of the political fence.
It's called Channel 4.
Not called Channel 4. And it would be regulated in a slightly different way. But we, the viewers, no longer really want to have that absolutely quite boring, often quite boring television, because you're not allowed to have very clear opinions.
All right. So
it's fair also to say you do have a lot of people who contribute, not presenters, who are of the left as well as the right.
Absolutely. And we have Just Stop Oil and all different campaign groups on. Nick, stay with me. I'm joined down the line by John Mayer, author and former BBC Current Affairs producer, who's also worked for Channel 4 and ITV. John, I argue very strongly that we meet the test of due impartiality.
Nigel, what a delight to be with you. Now, do you understand the concept of bias? Do you understand the concept of impartiality? I mean, you're very lucky. You've escaped the Ofcom silver bullet because you're not an MP. Maybe you're a shadow MP and you shouldn't be presenting shows. And what's the difference between news and current affairs? Why are you guys allowed to present current affairs and not news? I worked in current affairs for 40 years, and I don't know the difference between that and news. So, come on. All these Tory MPs masquerading as impartial presenters. Give it a rest. Give it a rest.
No, John, you're missing the point. Nobody on this channel says they're impartial. No one says that. What they do say is, we obey the law, we obey the rules that Ofcom give us, and we give due impartiality, which means we can give our opinion, but we allow the other side of the argument to have their say as well. And we treat the public at home, we say, look, ultimately, you're big enough and ugly enough to make up your own minds. What's wrong with that?
So when was the last time Diane Abbott was on, Jeremy Corbyn was on GB News? Where's the balance? Where is the balance? You know.
Oh, they're invited, John, they're invited regularly. And, you know, I just literally, as I was coming into the studio, past Nigel Nelson, you know, who's worked for Mirror Group newspapers for nearly 40 years, who was an open Labour supporter. Oh, no, we absolutely make sure that all sides of the debate get a fair airing.
Yes, I mean, it used to be said that the Church of England was the Tory party at prayer. GB News is now the Tory party at prayer, isn't it? You know, come on. You know,
I don't actually.
I
tell you what, John, if you actually ask GB News viewers what they think of the current Conservative Party, you might be quite surprised by some of the results you get. Is there space? I mean, you've worked in this industry for decades, as you've said already, and all right, we're a disruptor. I get that, I accept that. In very much the same way that Sky were disruptors, as Nick Pisani said earlier, you know, putting Norman Tebbit on a TV show with Austin Mitchell. Do you think that GB News should be allowed to continue as it is, or do you think, like Adam Bolton, that Ofcom should close us down?
I think Ofcom should grow up there in terms of GB News and other channels like you. I mean, I tend to agree with the awful Andrew Neil yesterday. But, you know, where are the left-wing channels? Is Paul Marshall going to pay money to set up a left-wing channel to go against you?
We've got Channel 4 News. They've been overtly a left-wing campaigning organisation for decades.
No, you haven't. You're misreading Channel 4 News. No, you've disrupted the ecology. All right, well and true. You got away with it for a couple of years now. Now it's time to put your hands up and say, we got away with it. Now it's time for us to behave.
All right, John Mayer, thank you for your opinion.
I've got a very quick question for you.
I'm going to come back to you on that, yeah.
Well, I would just like to ask you, would you rather continue to be an influencer with a TV programme or a politician standing at the next election?
Do you know, it's a hell of a question, because I look, particularly in America, I look at whether it's the Tucker Carlsons or the Sean Hannitys on Fox, and certainly voices on the left with CNN, and I ask myself, have they influenced American public opinion more as TV presenters with huge social media followings? Would they have done more as congressmen? And so I think it depends who you are.
Well, no, I'm asking you.
I don't know.
The upcoming general election.
I don't know. I haven't decided. I mean, I very much enjoy what I do here. I genuinely, and I'm here hand on heart to say that I genuinely enjoy being here. Yeah, we're disruptors. Of course we're disruptors. But, you know, as I said, Sky was earlier. I've got to work out what I want to do with my life. I haven't worked it out yet.
It's not a little bit bigger than Nigel Farage and what he wants to do with the rest of his life? I mean, you have influenced, for better or worse, politics in a way that few other non-politicians have.
No, this is a very attractive platform. Who knows? I may well still be here. I may not. I haven't decided. I might move to America.
When will we find out?
In a few weeks' time, I promise you. Right. I won't leave it long. Nick Pisani, thank you very much. John Mayer, thank you very much. Well, folks, I tell you what, I said at the top, I don't want to be self-indulgent, but there is a real debate going on around GB News. I'm proud of what we do. Some don't like it, but that's just the way that life is. In a moment, Priti Patel writes in The Express that Rwanda will help us take back control of our borders. I wonder, the Labour Party think it's so expensive, they'd get rid of the legislation.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A man who worked for Sainsbury's for 20 years was sacked because he didn't pay for a few bags for life. Niamke Dofu put his shopping through a self-service checkout after his night shift, and CCTV showed him choosing the zero bags used option, and he was fired for gross misconduct. Well, joining me now to discuss this in our studio is the lawyer and broadcaster and great friend of the show, Andrew Eborn. Andrew, welcome to the studio.
Join you, Mark.
certainly is. Now, on the one hand,
yes,
he was caught banged to rights on CCTV. It looked like, and the tribunal agreed, he stole the bags, but a 20-year career dashed on the rocks over 60p?
Yeah, I mean, the headlines are horrendous, aren't they? You sort of turn around on that sort of basis. So basically, there must be a valid reason for dismissing an employee, and you have to follow due process and so on and so forth. So they can look at about capability or conduct, and there has to be appropriate procedures set in place under employment law to afford that sort of protection. What they say, however, if there's gross misconduct, you can be dismissed instantly. Now, gross misconduct includes criminal offence like theft. And the reality is, in the law, if you take property, whatever its value, with the intent of permanently depriving the person of it, then that is theft. And so what they did, they looked at the CCTV footage, and the Employment Tribunal had a look at this sort of stuff, and the guy wasn't just pressed no bags, he went backwards and forwards and so on and so forth. So he knew he was getting bags. And what they sort of turn in, I always sort of know, trust comes in on foot, but leaves on horseback. And so what Sainsbury's are saying in their defence is, hang on, we lost trust in the guy, even though 20 years and so on and so forth. We need to make sure we have trust in our employees.
Do you think they've thrown the book at him, thrown the bag at him, to make all of us worry about us being watched by CCTV? Is this fella a scapegoat?
Oh, I think without doubt it's a story and a warning for everybody.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Rwanda's finished, of course, in the Palace of Westminster, but huge debate as to what it's actually going to mean, whether it's really enforceable. Now, the Labour Party have been very, very clear on this legislation. They say that it won't work. They say that it's way too expensive, and maybe they got a point, because we have spent 240 million quid on Rwanda so far and not send a single person. And after we send the first few hundred, the bill will go up by another 100 million. The argument, of course, that we get made by Rishi Sunak and others is that if you do that and it's a disincentive, in the long run, it will save money. Labour have been very, very clear. Now, Priti Patel was, of course, the Home Secretary at the time when Boris Johnson went down to Lid Airport and announced the Rwanda plan. She's written very strongly in the Express today saying that Rwanda will help us take back control of our borders. Well, Greg Smith, Member of Parliament for Buckingham, this issue, in terms of the Conservative Party's pitch to the country at the next election, appears to be as important as the economy.
No, I think it is. And when I did my summer surgery tour last year, the number of people that came up to me in all the villages around the constituency saying you've got to stop the boats was off the scale. When I go canvassing, it comes up on the doorstep all the time. It's in my inbox. This is something we are going to be judged on.
Is it the sense this is wrong or it's unfair? What is it that's really driving those people?
I think multiple things for different people. However, it's certainly the cost of it. We had the Best Western in the town of Buckingham taken over as an asylum hotel for a long time. Thankfully, that's now closed, and the University of Buckingham have bought it to be new halls of residence. It's the injustice of how much it's costing taxpayers to put those that have illegally entered our country up in hotels. It's the very fact that some people are trying to shortcut the system by risking their lives in the English Channel. So it plays on multiple levels.
A lot of
what we've got to do is stop it.
A lot of legal immigrants who come to Britain, been through the system, expensive, lengthy process, pretty unfair on them too, isn't it?
It's totally unfair on them. The number of people that I help who have perfectly good cases of why they wish to be in the United Kingdom or
so
bring
it
their
matters.
family in.
It matters. It matters.
They have to go through the ringer.
It matters in the Red Wall, we know that, but equally it matters in Buckinghamshire villages as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Which shows how important it is. Do you really think this policy is going to work? Do you believe in your heart, Greg Smith, that in 10 to 12 weeks' time there will be aeroplanes taking off for Rwanda?
We've got to make sure that that happens.
No, I didn't ask that.
Am I saying Rwanda is the be-all and end-all and it is the magic bullet that will solve illegal crossings? No, it's not. It is one piece in the jigsaw puzzle, but I think it's a pretty big piece in that jigsaw puzzle. And if we can't get some planes off, that we can't make this partnership with Rwanda work, I think that will reflect quite badly on us as a government and as a party. So we have got to get those aircraft in the sky. We've got to visibly show the people smugglers that if you take the thousands of pounds off people to risk their lives in the Channel and bring them illegally into the UK, chances are they're not going to be staying.
But here's the problem. Yesterday, 402 people crossed the English Channel. It was a relatively calm morning. You know, if Rwanda can only take 200 to 300 in the first few months, the numbers coming every day. I mean, if we get let's say in July, we get a fortnight of lovely settled weather. Rwanda can't take the numbers, can it?
Rwanda on its own can't, no. But this is the first partnership, and I think a big chunk of the reason that it's taken so long to get to this point and to have to pass multiple bits of legislation. And I regret we've had to pass multiple bits of legislation. If we'd put the notwithstanding clause in the first one, we probably wouldn't be having this debate right now. But it's about proving the concept. It's about proving that we legally can transfer those that have illegally entered the country to a safe third country. And once we've got people across to Rwanda, that's when hopefully, just as the EU, even the EU, are looking at this as a model to sign further partnerships with other countries.
They've got their own domestic problems. It's taken you 2 years with Rwanda, so goodness knows how long the rest would take. Final thought on this. Overnight, the Council of Europe have stated that they believe that the legislation that's been passed is contrary to their concept of European human rights, almost putting the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg on notice. Will Rishi Sunak really ignore rulings of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg?
Well, I hope he will. I've been a long-term critic of the ECHR.
But half your party love it.
Well, some of them do. You're right. I can't dispute the facts on that. But I've been a long-term critic of the ECHR. I think only domestic law should apply on that. We do need a British Bill of Rights. We need to enshrine in our own statute book that which we think is good and right for our country and get rid of the jurisdiction of foreign courts.
Love to see it. Thank you very much indeed, Greg Smith, MP for Buckingham. Now, the last surviving member of a Special Forces regiment during World War II had his dream fulfilled. He's gone to dine at the Ritz Hotel in London to celebrate his 102nd birthday in style. Chelsea pensioner John Morris volunteered for the Raiding Support Regiment and took part in the Allied invasion of Italy. GB News correspondent Cameron Walker went to meet him at the Ritz today.
War is not glamorous. We thought it was, actually, when you're young.
John Morris is the last surviving member of his SAS regiments from the Second World War. Before joining the Special Forces, his service began in Kent, shooting down German bombers targeting London.
The only thing I shot down actually was a chimney, kitchen chimney, accidentally by mistake. Nobody had any breakfast that morning. I wasn't very popular.
John was one of the last people to receive a 100th birthday card from Queen Elizabeth II.
All birthday cards from the children from Christchurch School.
Celebrating his 102nd birthday this week, local school children made him cards, thanking him for his bravery.
I think kids should know more about the sacrifice their forefathers made. Not me, I'm no hero, but all the RAF boys had died, and people like that, they don't realise that. They don't know much about it. They don't even know who Hitler was, half of them.
John, who's now a Chelsea pensioner, kindly agreed to share his wartime memories. In 1943, he was sent to North Africa with the Royal Artillery and passed Special Forces selection, taking part in the Allied invasion of Italy.
75,000 British and colonial troops were killed in Italy. The Germans fought back very well.
Ultimately, the Allies were successful, but a much more powerful, natural threat was not far away. Mount Vesuvius, famous for destroying the Roman town of Pompeii in AD 79, erupted.
I woke up in the morning, heard this rumble, looked outside, this wall of lava coming down. So never go on a volcanic island where I am, because it's very dangerous.
That year, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy. Known as D-Day, the operation led to the liberation of Western Europe and was one of the most famous and widely praised successes of the war. Far away in Italy, John and his comrades were branded with a less than flattering nickname, turned into a popular wartime song.
We've done 3 D-Days. We did the North African landing, we did the Battle of Britain, and we did the Italian landing, we did the Yugoslavia, Albania, and they called us D-Day Dodgers.
John celebrated his 102nd in style. First a party with the Chelsea pensioners, followed by a champagne lunch organised by friend and Irish Guards ambassador Frederike Crum.
The Ritz always had a wonderful relationship with the Chelsea pensioners. We celebrate in style, and he's never been to the Ritz, so that will be worthy of the 102nd birthday. Right, John?
That's right.
Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, what a delightful piece. And, of course, on the 6th of June, it will be the 80th anniversary of D-Day, probably the last time there'll be a significant gathering of veterans in northern France. To more contemporary military matters, the Prime Minister tells us we need to go on a war footing. We must up defence spending by 2030. But if we're on a war footing, why not up to defence spending now? I'll be joined by Lord Danner in just a moment.
Hi there, welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's going to be chilly overnight. Through the next 24 hours, however, increasing cloud will bring further showers by the end of Thursday. We've got higher pressure ebbing away towards the west and this increased influence from low pressure to the east. In between, some clear spells overnight and a chilly northerly airflow. That means temperatures will fall quickly. Under any clear spells, in rural sheltered spots, temperatures will dip below freezing. Generally in urban areas 4 to 6 Celsius, and there'll be variable amounts of cloud first thing as well. There'll also be increasing amounts of showery rain moving through Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, northern and central England, as well as the northeast of Scotland. The showery rain will become more widespread by the afternoon, so for much of England and Wales it's a case of bright spells interspersed by showers. Drier towards the northwest, western Scotland mostly dry with some decent sunny spells, 12 or 13 Celsius here, 14 or 15 in the southwest, just 10 again on the North Sea coast. Friday starts off cold with a frost in many places. A sunny start, but quite quickly the cloud will build and we'll see further showers here and there, particularly towards the east. The weekend brings more unsettled weather from the south, longer spells of rain affecting many parts of England and Wales, drier for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm joined down the line by General Lord Richard Dannett, former Chief of the General Staff. Richard, the Prime Minister yesterday for the first time saying the country needs to go onto a war footing. Whilst I accept that the international situation is not very good, isn't that slightly over the top?
Well, actually, Nigel, to be honest, I think that's slightly, dare I say it, misinterpreting what the Prime Minister said. What he really said was actually putting British industry onto a war footing, and that's what really matters, because actually it's British industry, along with American industry and German industry, that needs to produce rapidly the wherewithal that Ukraine needs to push back Russian aggression. So the extra £500 million that the Prime Minister announced yesterday is all going to Ukraine. Most of that actually will probably go into ammunition factories run by BAE Systems and others to produce the 155mm shells, the missiles and so on and so forth that Ukraine needs. So that's what he was really meaning as far as that was concerned.
OK. No, I take that point. Now, of course, we've been giving a lot of our artillery shells and other munitions to Ukraine, which leaves us ourselves very short. And I completely understand what you're saying about our industry needing to gear up. But, you know, I was asking yesterday why now, and I was perhaps cynically saying that it wasn't mentioned in the budget. Perhaps it was done for political reasons, but forget that. The question I want to ask you is, why not now? If we're going to increase spending from 2 to 2.5%, if the need to get our industry mobilised for greater production is as great as many think, why not just do it now?
Well, Nigel, I think in fairness again to the Prime Minister, actually it is now. The commitment is there to spend an extra £75 billion incrementally and increasingly between now and 2030. But the real inwardness of this, and many of us have been calling for raising our defence level of spending to 2.5%, maybe even to 3%. And in the budget, Jeremy Hunt said 2.5% when conditions allow. Well, actually, the dial has moved on now. The Prime Minister has said we are now committed to 2.5%, and we will find that extra 75 billion increasingly between now and 2030. So actually, that means the conversation for awkward people like me who believe we should be spending 3%. We're back 2.5% now, and the call now is to move beyond to 3% when conditions allow. And the other point that's really, well, several other points actually, we're telling our adversaries, particularly the Russians, don't kick us around, we're serious about this. But we're also saying to our allies, come on, Britain's showing leadership here. Some of you aren't even spending 2%, some are just over 2%. We're going to 2.5%. You just do your bit as well, because we want to keep the Americans in. And if we Europeans don't do our stuff, the Americans will sugar off.
Yeah, no, and Donald Trump has made that perfectly clear, and I think Joe Biden feels in the very same way. Many say that it's a very high probability that Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister before the end of the year. How do you see the Labour position on defence spending going ahead? They've made positive noises, have they not?
They have. They've echoed Jeremy Hunt in the spring budget by saying 2.5% when conditions allow. But I'm afraid realpolitik is as it is, that actually, if they walk back now from a firm British government of today's position of increasing to 2.5%, 75 billion extra by 2030, they'll be pilloried for cutting defence. So I'm afraid Keir Starmer and John Healey have got no options. They've got to move up to 2.5%. They've got to match what the present government is saying. And I rather hinted a moment or two ago, the conversation then might move to 3%.
Right, well, I can assure you, Lord Dannett, that the overwhelming majority of viewers and listeners to GB News would back you on the 3%. I have absolutely no doubt about that. Keep campaigning. Thank you once again for joining us on the show. Thank you. Now, I asked you the other night, should we have a go at the Trick Awards again? Remember, last year I won News Presenter of the Year because of the support that you gave me. And I sort of put it out there. Hundreds of emails coming in from you saying, go for it, go for it. The show is going from strength to strength. Let's get involved. Let's try and win it again. So let's try to do that. How do you vote for me as News Presenter of the Year? Well, it's poll-trick, tric.org.uk, and you can see there is up on the screen a QR code, a trick QR code that you can click onto, and with that you can cast your vote. Now, I'm not going to spend too long tonight talking about it, other than to say I will make sure over the course of the next few evenings that we get that QR code up, we get poll-trick.org.uk up. So don't panic. If you haven't got a pen next to you, haven't got a phone next to you, don't panic. I'll give you plenty of opportunities to do this over the course of the next few days, and the results will come out by the middle of May. And there are other GB News presenters who are in the hat as well. I'm looking, folks, for your support. Let's go for it. Let's win again, and let's really upset those in the industry, the Adam Boltons, the Nick Robinsons, the ones that want to see us close down. Let's show them how we feel about this channel and why it really, really matters. Now, there are very, very few figures in politics, particularly modern politics, that can command respect from both sides of the House, that have stood out for decade after decade as being people of genuine principle. Frank Field, I believe, was one of those people. We heard this morning that he died. He'd been ill for a long time. We heard that he died this morning at the age of 81. And GB News' economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, was a very, very good friend of his. In a minute, he'll come on and pay tribute to the life and career of Frank Field.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Leading motoring organisation has called for all new drivers to be banned from giving lifts to friends for 6 whole months after passing their tests.
Yes, the AA says around 5,000 people every year are killed and seriously injured in crashes involving at least one young motorist. Graduated driving licences introduced with limitations imposed on a period of time after a driver passes their test. So a two-tier system.
Well, is this sensible or yet more ageism when it comes to regulating our habits in the United Kingdom? Let's speak to Quentin Wilson, a motoring journalist and transport campaigner. Really interested to get your thoughts on this, Quentin. There are a lot of people who instinctively will say this is state overreach. This is telling adults that they can't do something that they've done for generations. What's your view?
Well, look, the recent accident with the convertible Mini where people were twerking in the back, this is due to driver education. The person in control of that car really should have told the passengers just to buckle up and stay still. We're not teaching kids to drive properly. We expect them to do all this stuff below the dashboard, grinding of gears, hazard perception, positioning of car, in this very, very small time window, when we should be doing it from school age, teaching hazard perception. So I've been a patron of an organisation called Young Driver, who's delivered 1.4 million lessons to 11 to 17-year-olds on private land with ADI qualified instructors with dual controls. And the accident rate for that group is 4%. The national average is 20%. So look, we can do this, we can reduce these fatalities if we teach kids earlier about road safety.
Is this an issue, frankly, with teenage boys and showing off?
The testosterone does always seem to come through, doesn't it?
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
First elected to the House of Commons in 1979, Frank Field's career in the House of Commons spanned decades, and of course he finished up in the House of Lords. Liam Halligan, you knew him very, very well. In fact, I think you even saw him last week.
So I met Frank Field when I was a young academic, making my way in my early 20s. He was a welfare reform expert at the time. He was the chairman of the Social Security Select Committee. And then I stayed in close touch with him. I was a Financial Times correspondent when he was the minister. And I have seen him over the years many times since. Why was I drawn to him and why did we become friends? We became friends and I was drawn to him because he really was a man of principle. He was somebody very much of Labour values. He set up the Child Poverty Action Group. He set up the Low Pay Unit, two really important institutions in this country. Yeah. But he didn't always believe in left-wing routes to achieve those Labour outcomes, more help for the poor. So when it came to benefits, you can sum up Frank Field's attitude in a phrase that he coined, but which many others have since used: give people a hand up, not a handout. Yeah. And in that sense, his politics were, in some senses, Victorian, self-help, bootstrap conservatism, which does appeal to many Labour voters. And indeed, he came into the Commons for Birkenhead in the northwest, of course, proud shipbuilding part of the world back then, in the late 70s, as a young, rather effete southerner. And he got rip-roaring majorities for pretty much the next 40 years. On the welfare side of things, it was Tony Blair, of course, that asked him to go away and think the unthinkable. He did and got sacked for it. He did. Tony... had we listened to him, would things be very different now? I think they would. I think the welfare system would be different. It'd be a lot less complex. I think we'd have a 10p starting rate of tax, which he helped to introduce. Gordon Brown wanted to reverse it. He then attacked Gordon Brown. That was just one of the clashes between him and Gordon Brown. When he went into government, not as Social Security Secretary, which Blair wanted to appoint him as, Brown wouldn't have that because he knew Field was a very, very quick thinker, very, very good with the numbers and the detail. And Brown wanted to be that person who had the policy detail in the room. And he didn't like to be gainsaid. This was the apogee of New Labour in the late 90s. But already then you had the big tensions between Brown and Blair. They hadn't yet become volcanic as they later did. But Frank Field was an early victim in that tension between Brown and Blair because Brown basically wanted to get rid of him, and so then Blair abandoned him to mollify at that time as Chancellor. We think increasingly these days that, somebody who's on this side of the divide can't possibly have a good relationship or like somebody on the other. It's one of the things that's gone wrong, actually, is we're not respecting the fact that other people have different points of view. But the remarkable thing about Field, all the way through, was that he was able, wasn't he, to find friends in the Conservative Party, as well as the Labour Party, as well as members of the business community. I mean, how do Conservatives deal with him? Well, so often he found friends across the aisle for a purpose. He famously riled the Labour left when he started as a constituency MP, along with an adjoining MP who was a Conservative, Linda Chalker, trying to save the Camel-led shipyard up on Birkenhead. And guess what? He succeeded. And that really riled a lot of the Labour front bench because he had gone into bat single-handedly pretty much against the Iron Lady, mano a mano, and she had been convinced by his arguments, and the good people of Birkenhead had Camel-led for a few more years than they otherwise would have had. I think that is why I became friends with him, because I was attracted to the cross-party nature, not just of his mind, but of his life. Talk to somebody like Ian Duncan Smith or indeed Peter Lilly, both people who have served on the front bench, both in government and then in opposition, respectively, on that fiendishly difficult portfolio, Social Security. They both really feared Frank Field because his endorsement of a particular policy would guide a lot of the rest of the House because his expertise was there. In my view, Nigel, and I don't say this lightly, and I've thought about this, even though he was only a backbencher for almost all the 40 years he spent in Parliament, he wielded huge, huge influence, and I think that's undeniable. But more than that, when it came to his writing and his policy advocacy, I would say he was probably the most important thinker on the British welfare state since Beveridge. Wow. No, that's a very, very big
comment. And I love the story you told me earlier today about his...
He always does this. You tell him a story.
Well, yeah, but you told...
I'm just trying to think of a less...
Yeah, but it's the Irish in you, Liam. You tell very good stories.
But sometimes they're even true.
Well, you never know. The one about his 30 years in the House of Commons.
So, it was 2009. The global economy was in meltdown. It was a difficult period. I was actually living abroad at the time, but Frank's fantastic parliamentary secretary, who I knew very well, and she will be feeling this tonight. I knew her very well, Jill Hendy, who worked loyally for Frank for many, many years. I'm glad I've managed to mention her. Jill sent me an email and says, I'm putting together a 30-year for Frank in Parliament. You know he'll do nothing himself. He'll just stay at home with his books and so on. So Jill put this 30th anniversary in Frank in Parliament. And, the guest list was unbelievable. The various aspects of Frank's life, right? So Frank and the church, the Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey came to speak. Frank and the Labour Party. Home Secretary Charles Clarke came to speak, who happened to be Neil Kinnock's bag carrier when Frank had all those battles with Militant in the early 80s, though that bit of it wasn't in Charles Clarke's speech. Frank and the media, Andrew Neil, someone that we all know well. And it was a real cross-party group of people. I distinctly remember Virginia Bottomley, Tory ex-cabinet minister, and Alan Johnson standing there having a wonderful conversation, chinking glasses, because they knew they had this friendship with Frank in common. And then, as I was speaking, comparing, I think it was between Andrew and George Carey, trying to come up with some words off the top of my head, as you do, Nigel. In walks, and the room went completely silent, because, of course, there's a murmur when I was talking. No one really interested. In walks the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher.
Wow.
Now, I'm not sure if this was her last public appearance in Westminster. The great Charles Moore biography will probably tell us that. But it was certainly one of the last.
Yeah.
This was late 2009. And she walked up to me and she said, "Don't worry, young man, carry on, carry on. And you know why I'm here?" And she turned around and she said, "Because he's a good man."
Wow.
So pointing at Frank Field. And
wow.
Frank. Now, what would the Labour left think of that? Yeah. But I think the country admires that, or at least that generates admiration across a lot of the country. I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah.
I think people want parties to work together. They want individual politicians of expertise and rank to work with the opposition parties. They want people to agree when they can, disagree when they can't, but to do so in a way that's more about the policies rather than the personalities and all the hurly-burly of politics. And that's what Frank Field was. In many ways, he was an anti-politician because he always focused more on the policy part rather than the political part of making our laws and statecraft generally.
Liam, beautiful tribute to a figure, much respected political figure. Very few people that I can think of in all the years that I've been involved in current affairs and politics that would command that level of respect across the divide. Jacob, he really was a well-respected man, wasn't he?
He was. Everybody liked him. And he was noble and brave, that he put up with Militant trying to get rid of him, and he was friendly and approachable. I didn't know him anything like as well as Liam, but all my interactions with him were friendly. And I think Liam's point about how you can disagree with people fundamentally, but you can still be polite, and you can still actually quite like them, is, I think, very important and civilising for politics.
And we need a lot more of it, don't we?
Oh, we definitely do. A lot of the dislike in Parliament is confected.
Yeah.
And I think voters don't like that because they realise that it's fake and that we can't possibly dislike people that much over a difference in whether national insurance goes up or down by 2p in the pound. It's not as if you're going to war. And I think this is important, that we should let the electorate know that there are many more cross-party friendships
where people can work and do things. And that applies to those of you out there who hate GB News, who keep writing to Ofcom saying we should be closed down. Respect the fact we have different opinions. Now, Jacob, what have you got coming up?
What am I going to be talking about?
Well,
I will be mentioning Ofcom and their report, but I'm also going to be starting with David Cameron, Lord Cameron, saying we don't have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Typically helpful intervention by the Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, I have to say, I thought what Cameron was really saying today was we should rejoin the European Union.
Well, he seems to regret that we left because he was
Yes.
talking nonsense about Dublin. We actually sent fewer people back to France than we took in.
Numbers
under
were
Dublin.
tiny, weren't they,
Yeah,
anyway?
yeah. Dublin didn't work. It was a con. And anyway, under the Refugee Convention, you're meant to send people back to the first safe place that they've got to. So Dublin was always an irrelevance.
Yeah, he's your Foreign Secretary.
He's not mine. He's the King's. You're promoting me.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much indeed. Well, there you are. Lord Cameron's going to get a right ear-bashing in a moment from Jacob Rees-Mogg, and quite right too. I'm done for the evening. Back with you again tomorrow at 7. Let's have a look first at the all-important weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, and welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's going to be chilly overnight. Through the next 24 hours, however, increasing cloud will bring further showers by the end of Thursday. We've got higher pressure ebbing away towards the west and this increased influence from low pressure to the east. In between, some clear spells overnight and a chilly northerly airflow. That means temperatures will fall quickly. Under any clear spells, in rural sheltered spots, temperatures will dip below freezing. Generally in urban areas 4 to 6 Celsius, and there'll be variable amounts of cloud first thing as well. There'll also be increasing amounts of showery rain moving through Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, northern and central England, as well as the northeast of Scotland. The showery rain will become more widespread by the afternoon, so for much of England and Wales it's a case of bright spells interspersed by showers. Drier towards the northwest, western Scotland mostly dry with some decent sunny spells, 12 or 13 Celsius here, 14 or 15 in the southwest, just 10 again on the North Sea coast. Friday starts off cold with a frost in many places. A sunny start, but quite quickly the cloud will build and we'll see further showers here and there, particularly towards the east. The weekend brings more unsettled weather from the south, longer spells of rain affecting many parts of England and Wales, drier for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. In this report,